So this architecture that we're looking at, this is not Nepali architecture. This is called Newari architecture. So it's very local to the Kathmandu Valley because the Newari community are the local inhabitants of the Kathmandu Valley. So they are the original inhabitants of the Kathmandu Valley. Now they have a very interesting blend of culture. Basically, it's a community of two religions. So we have Hinduism and Buddhism in one community. And I explain that on hand of this window because when you look at this window, what do you see? You see the carvings of the 5 Buddhas, you see Tara on top. So these are Buddhist expressions. Now if you look across on this window, the 3-phase window that is behind, behind the tree, and you look at the detail of the carvings, you see on the right side, you can see a Shiva statue and that kind of rainbow you see on top. Then you see on the side the statue with the multiple arms. So you see this is a purely Hindu window. So this comes from a Buddhist household. This comes from a Hindu household. Why did we want to restore this? Because my grandfather, when he was younger, he noticed that this architecture was disappearing. That's why it was so important to him to revive this, restore this, to keep this alive. So what he did was in the 1950s to the 1970s, he went around Kathmandu Valley, and Kathmandu Valley used to look more like this, and he bought these wooden artifacts from houses and buildings that were being torn down. He brought them home, and then in the 1960s, mid-1960s, he opened a workshop. And he started restoring the pieces because it was not only to save the architecture, but the other part was also the craftsmanship that is involved in them. So the craftsmen, because this architecture was no longer so relevant for new buildings were not being using this architecture, so these guys were not getting any more new jobs. So also the craftsmanship itself, the entire industry of craftsmanship, was slowly disappearing. So to keep that alive, he opened a workshop and had these pieces restored. So if we look at today, we are one of the last workshops that do this restoration work. Now you find this architecture in the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. We have 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Kathmandu Valley. So you can find them in some of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites and they're under protection. But besides that, it is very much in danger of disappearing. And the local households, day by day, disappear, and already to 90% has disappeared. So if you walk the street, you will not find anything like this that reflects this architecture anymore. It's preserving the culture. It's also keeping the culture alive in a way, because the expression, you see, this is a very expressive architecture. This is not, a lot of architecture is not this expressive. It tells you a lot about the culture that it is about, because you have all the sculptures, you have the symbols, they're all reflected in these carvings. In most of the architecture you see around the world, you will not find that. But here you find it. That's why it has a lot to do with the identity of the people of the Kathmandu Valley. And that was his major reason for dedicating his life to this restoration work of Newari architecture. So it's become a family mission, 3 generations, dedicating our lives to the Dwarikas. Dwarika, his name was Dwarika Dashreshta. That's why it's Dwarikas, because it's his collection, his mission, his idea that we follow. Now this piece is a very detailed piece. You see a lot of different dimensions, and there are a lot of different details, a lot of different sculptures that are carved into this. When this piece came to us, when my grandfather bought this, and we started restoring this piece was cut up into 15 small pieces. This entire thing was 15 small pieces. It took 8 artisans 7 months to just restore this piece. So that's why, my grandfather's, the majority of the collection is from the 1950s to the 1970s, but we're still restoring pieces today, because some of these pieces take a long time to restore. Now this is the most detailed piece that we have. And the interesting part also that this hotel you see today, all the buildings are designed around these pieces. So it's not that you design the building and then you design the window or the door frame. It's the other way around. You put the door frame, the windows, and then you design the building. What we like doing, we like to have these touch points where people can really immerse themselves into the culture of Kathmandu Valley. That's why Rana Mandi is one of our experience. The other experience, what we do is we do on a morning walk to Pashupati. One of my favorite things to do actually. We go at 7, we finish at about 9. The Pashupati temple normally is shown only the main temple is shown, but the entire temple complex, there are over 400 temples in that entire complex there. 400 temples in just that complex. So it's very interesting, and especially if you go there in the morning, you're basically by yourself. If you go at 7 and you go around and you go to the forest and so, it's a very beautiful experience. It's a nearly a very private experience that you get there. I think from the culture, the Newari community has been very influential on the entire cultural development of Nepal, because this used to be the cultural hub. I mean, 7 UNESCO World Heritage speak a lot about the depth of the culture that is existing in the Kathmandu Valley. And it's also very interesting because in the Newari community you have we are called Shrestras, so we are Hindus. Then there's the Sakyas. The Sakyas are purely Buddhist. Interesting story about the Sakyas. So the Sakyas are the descendants of Lord Buddha himself. So Lord Buddha was a Sakya prince, and then he became enlightened, became the Buddha. So the Sakyas later then settled in the Kathmandu Valley and became part of this Newari community. So that's why it's this blend of these two religions that you find here. If you look at the story of our architecture, the entire community, so there's a lot of craftsmanship, that has a lot of depth here. So one is this woodwork, wood carving. So normally they are referred as craftsmen. We call them artisans because we think this is more a form of art actually. Other things what we have, which reflects a lot about Nepal, is our restaurant called Krishnapan. It's a signature restaurant. Krishnapan is based. We have 6 organic farms. They are spread throughout the country at different altitudes. So they supply the majority of our grains and vegetables and pulses. And in Krishnapan we take the guests on a culinary journey throughout the country. So because Nepal is it's a very small country, but it's a very diverse country because we have the high altitude mountains, people living at 4,000 meters. We have people living in these different valleys, one of them being Kathmandu Valley, and then we have people living in the plain, in the deep jungles. So because of this geographical diversity, the culture, but also the food habits are fairly different from each other. So in the restaurant, we take them on a culinary journey throughout the different communities of Nepal and display the local foods that you find here. Again, something that people normally would not really know about And then another big form is sculpture making. If you go to Patan, it's full of sculpture makers. You can see it all around in these small shops. So there's a lot of cultural things that are rooted in this location. Of course, that time there was not Nepal. There were 3 little king cities here: Kathmandu, Patan, Bhaktapur. And because we were on the trade route, this used to be a fairly wealthy city. These 3 cities fairly wealthy. So that's why very heavily invested in art, architecture, culture. A little bit sad is that this story of this community has never been shared. It's not really known to people what actually is here, and even what Kathmandu Valley stands for. That culture, depth of the culture. Most people don't know that. Most people don't know that we have 7 World UNESCO Heritage Sites here. People don't know that we have this blend of communities in here, and that's what we want to share with the traveler, that when they come here they build a connection with the place, build a connection to Kathmandu, and maybe experience it, what Kathmandu could be. For me, it's one of the cultural hubs of Southeast Asia. Maybe if you want to compare it a little bit towards the Rome kind of thing, that's what I believe.